We made it. It's time to actually talk some Hawkeye football. The next great Iowa defensive back, plus old friend David Eickholt, stops by and talks Hawkeye basketball and football all today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked on Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes Podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also find us on YouTube. If you're on the YouTube side, hit subscribe. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. If you're on the podcast side, 5-star reviews greatly helps us here on Locked On. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, we have put basketball in the rearview mirror for the time being, though there is plenty to talk about on that side of things. We will be talking about the transfer portal, its impact, and in fact, maybe a little bit of news coming your way a little bit later today. David Eickholt is going to join us and talk about some of the potential targets in the portal for both Iowa men's and women's basketball, and we will get into that. But after the incredible run from the women's basketball team, getting back to the national championship game, well, it took us into April. Normally, this is a time that we are heavy, inundated with football content. We are talking about everything that we're getting out of spring practice, taking all different angles, and we're a little bit late to the party, but that's okay. All this does is it helps build that bridge back until we get into August camp and, of course, September when college football season returns. Today, our spotlight is on the defensive backfield. And throughout the years, obviously, we have grown accustomed to absolute greats and seeing what Phil Parker has been able to do year in and year out by finding his kind of guys that for the most part are not highly regarded coming out of high school. We're not talking about players that have 4 or 5 stars next to their name, but it doesn't matter because he is going to find the right fit, the right guy, and he is going to mold them into a tremendous defensive back. It doesn't matter if you're talking safety. It doesn't matter if you're talking cornerback. Time in and time out, that has been something that Phil Parker over the last 2 decades has proven. He is an elite evaluator and developer at this position. And in a way, you go into each and every season just saying, well, they'll be fine, right? They're going to figure it out. There's been hiccups. There's been issues when injuries have cropped up. That has turned into certainly some question marks, I would say, overall. But we come into this season now with a ton of guys with a lot of experience. And when you're talking about experience, you start in the backfield at the safety position with Quinn Schulte. Schulte's not a guy that's going to wow you physically. He's not a guy that you're going to be looking at. He's not going to win any of the swimsuit Olympics, right, when it comes to the NFL draft combine. What he is going to do, though, is he's going to be an incredibly heady player. He's going to make all the right calls. And in the Phil Parker defensive scheme, it is ultra important. We have heard so many times throughout the course of the seasons that defensive back, be it the strong safety or the free safety, whoever it is that is making the calls, their importance to Iowa football and what they're doing there. Getting everybody in the right spot, getting everybody lined up, everybody working in tandem with each other, and that person has a huge, huge load that they take on. And Quinn Schulte has been able to do that, and getting him back now for his bonus season this year, that is a huge step up. So you bring back Schulte, you got your leader, you got your quarterback of your defense back there, a guy that's made plays, a guy that certainly you feel like can play at a high level once again this season, and you pair him with Xavier Wampa. Xavier Wampa is one of the few 5 stars that Iowa has ever gotten in the recruiting era over the last 25 years. It's a rarity that you get somebody like this. And 2 years into his career for Xavier Wampa, playing limitedly as a freshman, and then what we saw as a starter a year ago. I still believe that there is more to untap with Xavier Wampa. When you look at Wampa, the physicality, the ranginess that he had, I've said it before, and it bears repeating, his ability to cover so much ground from that position is unlike anything I'd ever seen at the high school level. Now, how is it translating? How are they going to get there? That's going to be important because he needs to take another step. I think there's some more physicality that needs to be inputted and increased for him this season. I think that's something you want to see. Remember also last season, the Wampa was playing with an injured shoulder a season ago. And I think that maybe did limit a little bit what he was on the physical side. And then you throw the other one in Sebastian Castro also coming back now for a grad season, much like Schulte. Castro playing that cash position. We've seen how important that is in the evolution of the Iowa defense now over the last 5 years and what they've been able to do and the just elite numbers that they're putting up each and every time defensively. And a big reason for that is the play of guys like Sebastian Castro. They've had different looking guys. They've played different types of players in that role. You look at Dave Belton, much different than Castro. They've used a couple of different types, but Castro, we saw it a year ago, physical. I mean, he is like an undersized linebacker out there. The coverage skills are elite. You look at the numbers for Pro Football Focus, they're as good as anybody there. And that hybrid position, not a quarterback, not a safety, not a linebacker, just kind of something in between. And Sebastian Castro has done it at a really high level. And then you go to the starting cornerback positions. And we anticipate Jamari Harris coming back also for his bonus season this year. Saw a lot of Jamari a year ago, suspended the first 2 games last season because of the gambling investigation. He came back. It took a little while because remember the year previous in 2022, he had lost that season because of injury. But once he shook the rust off, he was playing at a really, really high level. And I think you're excited about him. While he was suspended, Deshaun Lee was the guy at the cornerback position. I thought he acclimated himself incredibly well. You saw teams right away were targeting him with Cooper DeJean on the other side, and Lee was right there. And I think you're going to see some big-time growth out of him this season. So those are your starting cornerbacks. And then you throw in a guy like TJ Hall. Now, TJ Hall was a big recruit, one of the better recruits in that class a couple of years ago. Now in his junior campaign, he's played. He's also been banged up. He was thrust into the lineup in that Nebraska game 2 years ago. It didn't go very well against the fastest player in the Big Ten that season. But TJ Hall, hearing good things about the way the camp is going for him, and he is starting to really click and really get it there. And then you have to talk about John Nestor. And Nestor's an interesting one. Sophomore out of Chicago from Marist High School. But the buzz has been tremendous since he showed up on campus. People talked about John Nestor, the next Riley Moss, the next Cooper DeJean. John Nestor's been that guy that's talked about. Now, a reason for it is also his pigmentation because he's a white quarterback, and we just don't see that very often. And we only really see it in Iowa City at this point in time. But good skills. They've been excited about him from the get-go, and he got an opportunity there. We won't get to see Cohen Entringer, who made a huge name for himself a year ago in special teams. He'll be back out there again. They are very excited about his future, just a sophomore. And then you got a bunch of other, got young guys there, Khalil Tate, who redshirted a season ago, what he's going to be coming up this season and how much impact is he going to be able to make coming up this year. Zach Lutmer, Tegan Davis, both guys. Davis coming off the knee injury that he sustained back in high school. He's got to add some weight, just listed at 160 pounds. Yeah, that's a little bit scary, but both those guys, what their future is going to hold. As always, the Iowa defensive backfield, no surprise, in really good shape and going to be one of the strengths of the team once again this season. As we continue here on Locked On Hawkeyes, we're going to get into our newsbreaker stories, and that is our man David Eickholt working on the beat with 24/7 Sports, HawkeyeInsider.com. Looking forward to getting a great look at everything going on in the world of Hawkeyes. We're going to talk about the transfer portal, the way that is set up right now for the Hawkeyes and what they're going to do, what they're going to have, both men's and women's side. We will get into that and a whole lot more as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. David Eickholt, he joins us next. Stay right there. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. You heard that right. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything. Slap shots, home runs, slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. As we go into the final week of the regular season for the NBA, they have opportunities for you. Who's going to make the playoffs? Who's going to make the big bracket? Who's going to get out of the play-in round? They have that and a whole lot more over on FanDuel. It is a great app and exactly what you're looking for your sports wagering needs. What are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
Let's get David Eickholt in here, HawkeyeInsider.com, 24/7 Sports. A lot of ground to cover with you, and we appreciate coming on. Want to do men, want to do the women. Obviously, football, lots going on with the University of Iowa. But let's start with the latest, and that's the championship game that all came to an end on Sunday afternoon. Boy, when it comes down to it, David, and you were there, South Carolina's they're just at a different level, aren't they?
No, they are. I mean, that's got to be one of the best teams that's ever been put together, women's college basketball. I know all the UConn teams are tremendous. I mean, even last year's South Carolina team. But they lose all 5 starters. And people can say what they want about how many 5 stars they have on the roster. They still have to make it work. And it's very clear that Dawn Staley has instilled a culture and a value system there that just works for that group. I mean, you talk about trying to get Camila Cardoso in foul trouble. Well, guess what? They got 2 or 3 other posts that can come in and produce similar results. I mean, at the end of the day, South Carolina was an absolute machine. They were very well put together. Iowa, if they play 100 times, maybe Iowa wins, 10 to 12 of the time. And I still thought they put together quite a fight. But yeah, I think you just need to tip your cap off to South Carolina and what they did. Unquestionably the best team in the country this year.
No doubt about it. It ends in another championship game. They played as long as possible for back-to-back seasons. And I think we'll look back and yes, there'll always be the disappointment of not getting a national championship, but this run that this team has put us on and what Caitlin Clark certainly over these last 2 years has done, I mean, this is rarefied air for Iowa athletics. I know wrestling and the championships there, but we're talking very, very much a niche sport in comparison to even what women's college basketball is. When you look back and you look back at the legacy of this squad and Caitlin Clark, and you look back at these 4 years, what are going to be your lasting memories?
I think, number one, you can't talk about the history of women's college basketball without the Iowa Hawkeyes now.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can say whatever you want about Iowa not being able to finish the job, but what Caitlin's done, and I don't care anymore, I'm going to flat out say it, don't give me this championship or bust when it comes to the greatest of all time conversations. Caitlin Clark's the best college basketball player that's ever walked the earth. What she's been able to do, and for her to not, I feel like get not enough credit for what she's been able to do, it's incredible. In terms of, they beat South Carolina last year, and there were segments about how the tournament should be canceled because South Carolina was so great last year. Caitlin Clark and Iowa were able to beat them. Iowa being able to defeat Kim Mulkey and Gino Auriemma in back-to-back games, get back to a national title. And then, of course, Dawn Staley, who's turned South Carolina into a blue blood at this point. I just think it's the overall impact that not just they made on Iowa, but they made on the sport as a whole. I mean, they made it must-watch TV. 18 million people watched. 24 million people watched Caitlin Clark's final game. I think you look at the stories of, Hannah Stolke playing out of position, what she's been able to do, being that pure 5. She'll be a 4 next year. Kate Martin probably goes down as one of the best leaders in Iowa athletics history, certainly Iowa women's basketball history. How a community embraced Molly Davis getting on the court for the final 20 seconds. Sydney Falter stepping up now is, going to be a focal point next season, what she's been able to do. It really is. There's so many compelling storylines with this team, but I think above all else, the way they've been able to not shy away from controversy when criticism would hit them, the way they embraced new fans, the way they tried to pave the way for the future generation while honoring former legends. Like, there's no such thing as a team that does everything right or people that do everything right. This group of women and the staff, I think they've been about as flawless as they come in terms of being able to embrace their role in growing the women's college basketball game. Yes, the championship would have been nice, and I think they were clearly disappointed they weren't able to get it. But I also think they have the perspective and they have the understanding that what they've done for the game, it's bigger than championships.
I don't remember which writer or former writer of the Omaha World Herald tweeted something, I'm paraphrasing, that upon further review, it seems like Caitlin Clark is going to have to win 2 championships before she's, anointed as the greatest, because one won't be enough. And obviously he's poking fun at some of the stars that have come before Caitlin Clark that are going out of their way to, set that bar at an unreachable place. But she did, and here's my takeaway. I got 2. What she meant to little boys and little girls filling arenas around the Big Ten footprint and wherever she went, and not just her, the whole team, because, Kate Martin signed a bunch of autographs. So did Gabby Marshall. I'm guessing Stolke as well. But how she affected boys and girls who will come after her. And then maybe as important as anything, how the team, the coaching staff and the team was able to keep the outside. All that noise that was coming their way, it didn't seem to affect them at all. They were successful in, keeping that volume as low as it possibly could be in an era with social media that, quite honestly, is incredibly hard to do.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think you need to tip your cap to Lisa Bluter and staff for creating a culture to really understand that pressure is a privilege. And how about, I know we always talk about Caitlin Clark, rightfully so, but how about Caitlin Clark being able to embrace everything? Because there is nobody that has had more pressure on them in college athletics over the past year than Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, for sure.
Without question.
Yep.
And for her to continue to answer the same questions from national media, from local media, time after time with a big smile on her face, staying after games, signing as many autographs as she can. I mean, after they won the Big Ten tournament, she was out on the court for about 75 to 80 minutes. Seriously, just signing autographs. She understands her impact, and to be 22 years old and to really just understand that she is going to pave the way. She is going to be a global sports icon at this point, if she is not already. For her to understand that and to not have an ego about it, I think you need to give a lot of credit to Lisa Bluter, give a lot of credit to her parents and the staff and the friendships that are all around her to keep her grounded. And I think you also need to give credit to the Iowa women's team, because how many of them could have been on a team where, they aren't happy. They're not getting recognition because all the attention's on Caitlin Clark. For Lisa Bluter to establish a culture where there's no drama, there's no toxicity behind the scenes. There's people that are very, very happy for Caitlin. And when you think about this too, and this is something Caitlin doesn't get credit for, she does not like talking about herself. She really doesn't. She understands she has to, but she tries to give shout outs to everybody on the team. She tries to shine a light on everybody. And I think that's also helped her in credibility in that locker room. But you're exactly right. I mean, for them to handle everything the way they have, it really is compelling. And I think it's very admirable.
So we look towards the future, and the future without Caitlin Clark and Gabby Marshall and Kate Martin and Sharon Goodman and on and on and on. It is going to be another look. They need a point guard. They don't have one on the roster. Kanena Johnson got hurt. Incoming Guyton, she's also injured with an ACL. They need a point guard. Lucy Olson is the hot name out there, the third leading scorer in the country a year ago from Villanova, 5'9" guard. And well, she took over some pretty big shoes herself, and Segrist taking over for her, who was the third pick in the WNBA a year ago. Jeez. What is the reality there with Lucy Olson and a connection to Iowa?
Yeah, I mean, it's good. Iowa's going to be heavily involved. I mean, I think when you look around, some of the teams are interested. Ohio State's reaching out. Indiana's reaching out. UConn, I've been told now, has had contact with her. She is from the East Coast. Several schools on the West Coast want to get her. USC's in a name, a school thrown around. But from what I've been told, she wants to stick around the East Coast or the Midwest. And I think Iowa right now is in a strong spot for her. I think UConn, if they take her seriously, they might be able to. But it's also, what's Lucy Olson want? Does she want to be a generational shot chucker, or is she trying to win? Because if she wants to continue to score the clip she is, she could stay at Villanova. If she wants to make some more NIL money, if she wants to be on national TV, if she wants exposure, I mean, Iowa and UConn are probably two of the top schools in the country when it comes to that. So I don't want to say Iowa's a leader right now, but I do think Iowa is heavily involved. And I do think there's a realistic chance that Lucy Olson is a Hawkeye next year.
Interesting. Well, we'll follow that. How about some Hawkeyes that are going to play for Fran McCaffrey? Are the men getting any closer to replenishing their roster, David?
Yeah, I mean, Iowa's certainly right now, I think, keeping the oven warm for some prospects. I know they did just set up a visit this week with the Moorhead State guard, John Rothstein, I believe, first reported that about 20 to 25 minutes ago. He had one of the highest assist rates in the country. Drew Billwell, very quick athletic guard, great passer, needs to improve his jump shot a little bit, but he can set up teammates. But Iowa's probably talking to 5 to 8 heavily as far as I'm aware of. So they are prioritizing a few spots right now. But, it's also what are the priorities of guys going to be? Because I don't know right now with some of these big schools if Iowa can compete on the NIL front when it comes to men's basketball. I just don't think that that's realistic. So Iowa is trying to replenish the roster. I still think there's a long way to go when it comes to it. But with the recruiting dead period coming to an end, I believe tomorrow, there are going to be some visits in the works.
We see, of course, here in the state of Iowa State already filling up with a bunch of transfers coming in. What is, I guess, in comparison to other programs, why is Iowa so slow to react? Is it financial? Is it just the way that Fran likes to do things and making sure that culturally it's the right fit? Why does it seem like Iowa's so much slower than other programs in the portal?
Yeah, I think they are a little bit slower, but I also don't think they're as slow as on the record. I think Iowa tells recruits and tells people that they don't want to, let the national media know that Iowa reaches out to them. And I don't know if that's simply, if that's paranoia. I don't know if that's just the way that Fran McCaffrey and staff operate, but they really like to keep things low key. And I do think that that's a part of it as well. But I do think they are a little bit slower. But, on top of that too, we know that Fran is probably as clean as they come when it comes on the recruiting trail. And let's not act like that, basketball recruiting has always been a pristine, clear cut, sort of industry. I mean,
above board
for years. Exactly. All ethical, all that. No, never. So, I think Fran McCaffrey does things by the book. I think he stays well within the rules. And, I hate to say it, but at this point, if you're not cheating, you're really not ahead when it comes to college basketball recruiting.
That's not crazy.
No.
What about some of the former Hawks, Perkins and Patrick McCaffrey? How about those two? Are you hearing anything?
Yeah, so I think Patrick right now is setting up some visits. I believe that there are going to be several high majors involved. I know some other schools have been reaching out to him. I mean, you look at Clemson, I think, has been a school that's been thrown around. Butler's been a school that's been thrown around. But he is going to go high major, and we'll see what he wants to do. I mean, if he wants to go try and make some major NIL money somewhere, I think that there's going to be a market for that for him. And, ultimately, too, when it comes to Patrick, I think he'll have a great year. I think getting out of Iowa, getting a fresh start, I think that's going to be really, really good for him. So I'm intrigued about that. Tony Perkins, we'll see. I think Iowa fans would be very comfortable rooting for Tony Perkins if he goes a couple of different places. I think Missouri right now could be the leader in the clubhouse, which is strange considering they're fresh off an 0-18 season in the SEC. But I do know that Indiana's been also thrown out there. Oregon's been out there. But I'll tell you, it could be a rough go if Tony Perkins comes back to Carver Hawkeye Arena and he's not wearing the black and gold.
All right, so one more on basketball. Probably need to about Peyton Sanford and the fact that he is going through the process of the NBA. A lot of folks, Trent included, say that this is the year that the NBA draft is not deep. Next year, the opportunities may not be there. I mean, they're going to draft 60 players in the 2 rounds. Peyton Sanford, because this is a bad year, may lead him to staying in as opposed to other years. What are you hearing on that front, David?
Yeah, I mean, I think Trent's exactly right. I think this is the worst draft class that's been in my lifetime. It's just not deep. There's really no pure superstars, and I don't know how much depth that there's going to be. And you talk about Peyton, I think it's going to come down to a couple of things. One, what's the feedback going to be for Peyton Sanford? If he returns to Iowa, how can he improve his draft stock? Because there are going to be certain things right now that I don't know how much he can improve on. Talk about short lateral quickness. You talk about athleticism. We know what he can do, but he's also a really dynamic shooter. He could be a guy that comes off the bench, and shoots 8 times in 5 minutes. I mean, that's sort of his game. He's improved as a passer. Rebounding wise, I think could be a little bit tougher going in the NBA, but I think the NBA style fits Peyton Sanford, especially on the offensive end. But 2 is can Iowa match NIL to have Peyton Sanford come back? Right now, I'm pretty split if he comes back or not. I'm not going to lie. I would be, if you asked me a couple weeks ago, I probably was at 75% chance he comes back. At this point, I still think he comes back. But I think it's a lot closer than 50-50, depending on what the feedback's going to be for him. So I'll certainly be talking to people here the next couple of weeks. So if Peyton goes in there, hits 85 and 93, in a 103-point workout, that could definitely help his draft stock.
Interesting. David Eickholt joining us. David, last thing on the football front, got to hear from defensive line, defensive backs earlier in the week. Tomorrow you get some more players, 10:30 and 20 minutes? You get to film a little practice there. Just give us an overview, spring practice, what you're hearing, kind of what the buzz is as they implement the new offense.
Guys, motion. All
right.
When it comes to the offense. I mean, that was the first thing down every defender's belt. And they said, the way that Iowa's offense is working right now, its goal is to try to trick the eyes and to make the defenses do undisciplined things. And Aaron Graves threw this out there. I knew right when I tweeted I was going to get picked up and people were going to go about it. But some of the offensive players believe it's a watered down version of a Kyle Shanahan offense. Okay. I'm not saying it's going to be a 49ers offense. I'm not talking about that. But in terms of these short passes, getting the tight ends involved, getting the wide receivers involved, having run pass options, I do think right now the early indications are that Iowa's having a lot of fun with this offense. The offense kind of feels quote unquote rejuvenated, I think, more than anything else. And I think that we'll be able to talk to some more players tomorrow. I requested Cade McNamara. I think it'd be really good if Cade McNamara came out and talked, even though he's not a full participant right now. But as far as the defense goes, I think that they're incredibly confident. I mean, they returned so many different starters. John Nestor is the guy to keep an eye on at cornerback. Y.A. Black returns. I think there's a lot of standard and a lot of expectations that Xavier Wampa could take the next step as well. So, it's all good, guys. I mean, when's the last time we've really had a bad thing to say in spring football? Everybody looks faster. True. Everybody's stronger.
Yeah.
Everything's better. I mean, that's kind of the story of it. But I'm in the see it, believe it when I see it mode when it comes to the offense. But, the motion, some of the things that they're talking about, they at least perk my eyebrows up a little bit.
That is David Eickholt joining us here on Locked On Hawkeyes, talking everything going on in the world of Hawkeyes. Some good stuff there out of the offense, things to get excited about, and that transfer portal and the potential for the Iowa women to maybe have their next great point guard. As we continue here, Locked On Hawkeyes, Iowa baseball. Yeah, we get through basketball, and it's time to talk baseball. Things a little more concerning than maybe you'd expect. We'll do that as we continue here on Locked On Hawkeyes. Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball. Makes getting tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Gametime app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch. Killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seats, and their lowest price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. Pick out any game that you like. You're a Twins fan like me? Boom. Get up to Target Field. See a great one. Brewers, Cubs, Cardinals, White Sox, wherever you are here in the Midwest or wherever you are across the country, Gametime has you set up with incredible deals all throughout the season. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and a whole lot more. And the lowest price guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDON COLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Trent Condon back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every single day. Final moments here. And as we sit here watching Iowa baseball team, as they face off against St. Thomas, it is not going well. They're down 5-0 going into the second inning. Woof. Terrible. Team St. Thomas RPI at 202. So I looked at this before this one even began. And we know that the beginning of the season obviously did not go the way that we hoped, that we anticipated, right? We wanted to see a whole lot more out of this team. They're a preseason top 25 team, but they go down to that big tournament, Jacksonville, get swept by Auburn, Virginia, Wichita State. The Virginia loss, you can understand. Auburn, Wichita, not very good. You lose 2 out of 3 against a pretty average Ole Miss team. You lose 2 out of 3 against a bad Jacksonville State game. You have an opportunity against Georgia. You lose that one. You hate to say it's over on April 10th. This thing very well may be over. Iowa's RPI going into the game today, and if this one ends in a loss to St. Thomas, it's going to plummet even more. Their RPI is at 138th in the country. They are 14-13 overall. An RPI of 138. That is 4th from the bottom of the Big Ten. The Big Ten is not like it is for many other sports. The Big Ten in baseball is not one of the powers that be. Coupled with a bullpen that has struggled this season, Iowa's only shot of getting into the NCAA tournament, again, as being a preseason top 25 team, is to win the Big Ten tournament. And to do that with a bullpen and even a starting staff that has been as leaky as Iowa, talking about an at-large bid is not likely. It's going to have to be what happens in Omaha. That's a long ways away, a lot to get better, but it's very concerning right now looking at this Iowa team. Lose the final 2 games on Saturday against Michigan. Michigan now sits alone in 3rd place in the Big Ten. Nebraska very good this season. Illinois is off to a good start. They got the series win against Purdue, couldn't continue the momentum against Michigan. Iowa has dug themselves an incredibly deep hole this season in baseball. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll be back with you tomorrow. We're going to be talking recruiting with our recruiting guru here on Locked On with John Hill. He's going to stop by. Plenty to get into with him, including a 4-star running back from Florida, his home state, that'll be making his way to Iowa City coming up this weekend. We'll talk about that and a whole lot more. Take one final look at the class coming in, the class of 2024, his thoughts on that, and a much more football as we continue our way through spring football. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.